Hi, I'm Pat Morley, and we're so pleased to welcome you to Course 2, Methods and Tactics in the No Man Left Behind Self-Paced Training. In the first course, you laid a solid foundation for your discipleship with men. In this second course, we'll be helping you put these ideas into practice. These are not ideas we dreamed up. We watched what successful churches were actually doing and built our model around that. These are actual best practices of churches that are effectively discipling men. A special thank you to the many leaders who made this training possible.
Well, guys, welcome to Course 2 in the No Man Left Behind Self-Paced Training. This course is entitled Methods and Tactics. And if you took the first course, Foundations, you had an introduction to the No Man Left Behind model. And I want to run through that model again really quickly as we go into the methods and tactics so that we know where we're starting from. The No Man Left Behind model, remember we spoke about in the last course, is the grocery bag. It has all the concepts that you need to have an intentional strategy, an intentional process to disciple the men in your church. And the model gives us a way to sort of take that bag of concepts home with us. It gives us a way to keep all those thoughts organized so that we know what we're doing when we're trying to implement this in our churches. And at the bottom of this model, you can see we have these three levels of foundations. The first foundation that we talked about was that discipleship is the portal priority. So we're going to write portal priority down here. And when we say discipleship is the portal priority, what we mean is that should be the focus of our efforts, is to build disciples. We're not trying to focus on men's behavior at the same time, so even their behaviors that we want them to stop. We're also not trying to just get them to do a bunch of stuff, sing songs and give money and those kinds of things. We're really focused on helping them love God with all their heart, mind, soul, and strength, love their neighbors as themselves, and then as we help them grow closer in the relationship with Christ, then the behaviors will follow behind that. But we really want to focus on discipleship as our portal priority. At the next level, we talked about the man code. And what the man code speaks to is the environment that we create for the men in our church. We want an environment that tells men that you're important here, that we want you here, that there's a place for you here, that there's something for you to be a part of, that this isn't just a place for you to drop your wife and kids off and then go play golf, but that the church is a place where men are welcome and where men participate and where men are able to take part in the leadership of the church. And so we want to create an environment that's friendly for men. And then at the top level, we talked about the three strands of leadership. So I'll write three strands up here. And the three strands of leadership that will be necessary for you to build a sustainable ministry to men in your church, discipling ministry to men in your church, are the enthusiastic support and involvement of your senior pastor, a passionate leader, somebody that wakes up in the morning thinking about how are we going to disciple the men in our church this week, and then a committed team to surround that leader, surround that pastor, and help pray for, vision cast, plan, and actually engage themselves in discipling men in the church. Your team and your passionate leader, they want to become to each other what we're trying to help the men of the church become. So these are the three foundations of our model. The next thing we talked about was the spiritual journey that men go on, and we use this concept of a wide, deep continuum, wide and deep. And when a guy is early in a spiritual journey, we're going to cast the net wide, right? We're going to do things that have a broad appeal, bring guys in based on some of the interests that they might have. And then as a guy matures spiritually and gets more and more involved in the church, gets more and more interested in the Bible and following Christ and spiritual things, we're going to go deeper and deeper and deeper with him. And the reason the wide, deep continuum is so important is that, for one thing, if you have guys that are really deep spiritually and all you do is give them wide things to do, give them sort of shallow things to do, then eventually they're going to get bored and leave. At the same time, if you're trying to bring in guys that aren't really that interested in spiritual things and all you're really doing is offering them deep, deep spiritual activities, they're not going to have the context to even understand or be interested in that. And so we want to plan our activities across this wide, deep continuum, and we're going to talk about that more in the Methods and Tactics course that you're about to take. Then we talked about how do you categorize your men. And so there's 5 types of men. I'm just going to write 5 types up here. 5 types of men. And starting from the wide side, we have men who need Christ. And then we have cultural Christians, guys either just inside or just outside of your church. Biblical Christians, these are men that have now decided that they want to really be involved in spiritual growth. And then your leaders. And remember, we talked about a leader, maybe a little bit of a different definition of a leader, but a leader is somebody who's interested in helping other people grow. Not necessarily somebody that stands up front, but a guy who's focused outward and upward and helping other guys grow closer in their relationship with Christ. And then we talked about across this whole continuum, there are hurting men at any given time in your church. Maybe as many as half of your men might be going through a job crisis, a financial crisis, a marriage crisis, a health crisis, any of those different kinds of issues that they're dealing with. They may be hurting, and so those are also opportunities for us to show them the gospel and show them how that can be a part of their lives. Down here then we sort of have a conveyor belt, right? And the conveyor belt is made up of all the activities of our church, not just our men's activities, but all the activities of our church. And so we use this phrase, all-inclusive ministry. All-inclusive. And an all-inclusive ministry to men is a mindset. It's a way of looking at the things that the church does and helping to maximize the impact, the kingdom impact, of every interaction our church has with every man. From the UPS driver, to the guy singing on the praise band, to the guy working in the nursery, working in the parking lot, handing out bulletins, collecting offering as an usher, wherever men are in the church, all of those activities are an opportunity for us to help a man become discipled. Obviously, it includes our men's only activities, but we're going to have a much broader view. This will help us eliminate some of those turf battles that we have, your ministry versus my ministry. It helps us address the issue of some guys feeling like they're in the ministry, the men's ministry, and some guys aren't in the men's ministry. It puts you on the pastor's team because your pastor now realizes you're not trying to create a whole separate church for men alongside the church that he's already got with all the demands that it has on his time. And it takes the pressure off you because you don't have to do everything. When you are looking to maximize the impact of all the ministries that deal with men in the church, it takes the pressure off you and you can just focus on those areas of need, those gaps, as we'll talk about again in Course 2. So an all-inclusive mindset. So what we have here then, as you can see, is as a conveyor belt. We're taking men who need Christ or who are at a certain place in their spiritual development, and we're drawing them down this conveyor belt. We're helping them get on this conveyor belt and progress towards having a deeper and deeper relationship with Christ. And the goal of a conveyor belt is that once you're on it, it takes you where you want to go. That you don't have to keep getting guys started over and over and over again. And so we're going to try to create a seamless process that once we get a guy in here, the process just keeps making it obvious and easy for him to take that next step moving forward. And so the engine that runs this conveyor belt is the create, capture, sustain cycle. And in the middle of this create, capture, sustain cycle, in the hub, is our vision. Now, vision is more than just a purpose statement or mission statement. It's much more than that. It's a mindset. It's a communication tool. And that's the first thing that we're going to hit in Course 2 is really how do you communicate your vision successfully to the people in your church, and who do you need to communicate it to maximize your men's discipleship efforts. And then we have this cycle here, and we call this the create, capture, sustain cycle. So I'm going to write create, capture, and sustain. And what this is when we're trying to draw guys in, trying to get them to take that first step, we're creating value for them. We're creating momentum by creating value. So we look at our men and we say, all right, what's valuable to them? What will draw them in? And then we plan an activity or an opportunity that will meet their needs, that will get them interested based on where they are on their spiritual journey, and we draw them in. Once we get them in, then the next thing we have to do is we have to capture the momentum that we've created. A lot of times we get guys excited about something, and then they go away because we haven't captured the momentum. And so whenever we get guys interested and involved, we always need to be ready to show them the right next step. That's what capturing momentum is all about. Once we've got them engaged at that next level, then what we're going to do is we're going to sustain the change in their lives by connecting them with the ministries in the church that are doing the most effective job of discipling men. And so that's the sustain change step. And as we keep guys doing this, and then we're going to draw them into the next level, the next opportunity, we're going to capture the momentum of that activity. We're going to channel them into the next thing that's going to help them keep growing. And we're going to keep them moving down this conveyor belt by always showing them what the right next step is. Just keeping them moving, making it easy, making a seamless process for them to move down the conveyor belt as they become more and more developed in their relationship with Christ, as they become more and more discipled men. And our goal is to get them down here to the leader part, and then what do? Then now they're down here helping us engage more men in this process, helping more men follow Christ, and more men become disciples. That's our goal. We're not about behavior modification, we're about heart transformation. We're trying to build disciples who love God with all their heart, mind, soul, and strength. And that's what the No Man Left Behind model is about. Here we are in the Man in the Mirror studios, and we're going to start each session of Course 2 with you guys, Pat Morley, founder and CEO of Man in the Mirror, David Delk, the president of Man in the Mirror, Charles Cooper, our Man in the Mirror faculty member and pastor of Divine Church, and I'm Brett Clemmer, vice president of Man in the Mirror. And before we jump into this next session, guys, I'd just like to know, we're going to talk about vision. So why do you think vision is so important in a men's discipleship effort?
Well, Brett, guys have so many different things going on in their lives. There's distractions, there's hobbies and work and family life and just a lot of different things that they could be committed to. And so if we can speak as a church to our men with a cohesive, unified voice, something that's big enough that they want to be involved in, it gets everybody on the same page, it gets everybody moving on the same direction, and there's real power there in the life of our church.
So why is vision important? Well, clarity of vision means an acceleration toward the goal. If you're driving along and it's foggy outside, you have to slow down because you don't have good vision. But when the sunlight burns the fog off, then you can accelerate and move more quickly to the goal, to the direction you want to go.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
To me, if I was going to use an analogy, I would say something like this. It would be like dying the death of minnows. If you were being bitten by a minnow, it takes an awful lot of bites for it to kill you. And an organization without vision is like that. It's just aimless, it's purposeless, it doesn't get anywhere. It ends up frustrating everybody involved. Vision brings such clarity, such focus, such capability. Wow. It's so necessary.
Well, that's great. So having a clear vision helps dispel the minnows. It helps clear the fog away. It helps us get all our guys involved in something bigger than themselves. It really compels guys to be involved. And that's great. And so let's go right now to our first session on vision with David Delk.
Welcome to Session 1 of the Methods and Tactics course as we talk about casting the vision for our men. In this course, we're going to take the No Man Left Behind model and what we've already learned about it, and we're going to start actually building the very practical implementation plan for what this looks like in our church. And so we're going to start at this vision level because that's one of the most important components is how do we clearly communicate that with our men. And so I've asked Victor if he would help me out. Victor, would you mind coming up here to the front? And Victor's going to help me out by just being a little part of an illustration that we're going to use here that I think is very apropos. Could you just stand here and face these guys? And it's very simple what I want you to do. I just want you to take this ball, I want you to toss it in the air, and I want you to catch it. Just like this. Okay, can you do that? Sure. All right, awesome. Yeah, just do that. Perfect. Now, what I'd like to know from you all is there something that you guys have done in the community, maybe as a volunteer, not church-related, but some other kind of activity where you got involved, provided some leadership, whatever it is. Can you think of something like that? I'd love to hear about something that you were involved in the community. Is there anybody who's done a volunteer-type position? Okay, great.
I was a school mentor, And on the program that we were assigned to was taking troubled youth that had the wherewithal to go to college, but they could not for whatever reason. And basically 4 years in the high school with us gave them a full ride scholarship.
Wow.
And basically I met every week and helped them through girlfriends and problems at home. And
Awesome. Now tell me, why did you get involved in that?
I just felt drawn to do that. I just wanted to go out from the church and get out in the community where the real people are.
Awesome.
And meet the needs there.
Great.
He's now a lieutenant in the Cocoa Beach Police Force.
Fantastic. That's a great story. Thank you. All right, who else had somebody else mentioned something? All right, great.
Yeah, I led a group to do a Helping Hands project down in Paramore District, where they're working with homeowners and trying to rebuild homes and rebuild the community. And we worked with an elderly lady that had lost her husband, owned her home. Her front door was falling off. There were a lot of handyman fix-it-up type of things that needed to be done. And it was rewarding, very rewarding to go down and to be able to see the smile that we put on her face for everything that got done.
Awesome.
And a lot of times those folks feel, hopeless, and it's great for them to see people come out
Now
and
tell me,
help.
Brian, why did you do that?
It felt good.
Uh-huh.
It felt good.
All right.
That was bottom line.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. Well, it's interesting, when we do this training and we ask people those questions, I've never had a single person yet that told me, yeah, I was the head of the PTA at the elementary school. And I say, really? Oh, tell me how that happened. And the guy says, well, I don't know. I was just driving down the road. The lights were on at the elementary school, and there were some cars there. I pulled in and walked inside, and all of a sudden they voted. They elected me the president, and I've been going every month since. Right? No, everybody has a reason why they do the things that they do. Now, Victor, let me ask you, how long would you stand up here and toss that ball?
Probably until I get tired.
Okay, how about if we stop and break and we just keep going, you're just going to keep doing that no matter what?
Well, I don't see no purpose.
Yeah, at some point, you're going to say, why am I doing this, right? Exactly. All right, thank you very much. Sit down. It's funny because you'll see some guys that are determined and they'll be like, okay, I'm doing this. Lunch, dinner, sleeping, doesn't matter. He told me I'm doing it. I'm going to stick with it. And then I'll have some other guys that'll do this example, and they'll do it about 3 or 4 times, and they'll see me talking to the other men, and they'll go back to their seats, right? Either way, works perfectly. Because the point is that we have a lot of men in our churches that are sitting there, and they are basically just tossing a ball up and down. Somebody told them to. Somebody said, pass out these sheets of paper. Somebody said, go to this class. Somebody said, put some money in the plate when it comes around. But they don't really know why they're doing what they're doing. And when you have men like that, at some point, they're going to look around and they're going to say, no, why am I doing this again? Why am I tossing this ball up and down? And that's where the concept of vision becomes so important, because we have to communicate with men why we want them to do what we want them to do, why we want them to be involved in our ministry. Men want to be involved in something bigger than themselves. They want to be involved in something that they believe is going somewhere. Particularly with younger guys, we hear all the time, how can we get more young men involved in our ministry? Well, one of the ways that you can do that, or one of the things that's most effective in that, is to communicate with men what it is you believe God is going to do because of these efforts that you're engaged in. In other words, the era of saying to men, hey, come to our breakfast on Saturday morning, just because, that era is over for most of us, okay? Men are not interested in just doing things because someone told them to. They want to know what's going to happen because we're involved in this. They want to know that there's some expectation that God is going to work, that someone's life is going to be changed, that a house is going to get rebuilt, that a family is going to be restored, that a young man is going to become a police officer one day because of my ministry. To hear those testimonies, to see those stories, to see that God is actually at work. That's what men want to be a part of. And so we've got to do a better job of communicating the vision to men. If you say to your men, if you put in your bulletin, men's ministry meeting, 7:30, room 14, in every way that matters, that's a lie. in every way that matters, that is a lie. Listen, I believe there's spiritual warfare going on around this issue. I believe there's a blindness around this issue. Why are your guys more committed to college football than they are the gospel of Jesus Christ? Why are your guys more concerned about the opening of hunting season than they are about the man next door that doesn't have a relationship with Jesus? Now, part of it is their issue, okay? We understand this. We have lots of distractions. Our hearts get turned away to all these different things, and we all experience it as men. But there's another part of it that comes back to us as leaders. Because we have not done a good enough job, we have not been good stewards of the opportunity of casting a vision for our men to call them to something great. Think about that passage of Scripture that we used in the first session, the first training, foundations course, about Matthew 28, where Jesus says to those disciples, they'd never been more than 30 or 40 miles from their home. Never more than 30 or 40 miles from their home. And Jesus said, I want you to go into all the world and make disciples. Now, you talk about casting a big vision. That's a big vision, right? That is a big vision. And you see it all throughout the Scriptures of men who had a vision, who had a dream, and they are pronouncing that dream, and other folks are attracted to it. And so we need to call men to a big vision. Now, one of the key components of this vision is the concept of resonance. The concept of resonance. When I say the phrase, just do it, to you, what happened? Okay? You can't help but think about Nike, can you? I mean, you may have thought about running or basketball or golf or whatever it was, but you couldn't help but do that. And now think about it. Those three words say nothing about any particular company. They say nothing about even athletics. It could have been, just do it, could be a credit card company. It could have been an airline. It could have been, a furniture store. It could have been anybody, but not anymore, right? Now it can only be Nike, because they have invested to make that phrase resonate with us, okay? So how about we're looking for a few good men? Okay, Marines, right? And that hasn't been used in years, and yet it still resonates with people because of the impact of that phrase. And so we need to communicate with our men in ways that resonate with them. And so when we talk about that in terms of a vision, what we mean is we're talking about using strong language that guys can connect with, and that over time that we can begin to communicate it so that it has more and more content. The same way that just do it brings to your mind, golf equipment or a basketball or running shoes or whatever. That's what has been invested in that over time. So we need to communicate to our men so that over time they begin to build up this sense of what it means to be a man in our church. Oh, it means that we're the kind of men who rebuild houses in our community. Oh, it means we're the kind of men who mentor young boys. We're the kind of men who work with underprivileged children. We're the kind of men who get in small groups, who take mission trips, who have worship, who serve in our youth program. And all these different things over time begin to resonate with guys. And they think about that night around the campfire, at the end of the retreat when 3 or 4 guys were sharing and how moving that was. Or they think about the time when they went over and served the widow who is a shut-in, and all the things they were able to do for her and how much she appreciated it. And these things begin to resonate in their hearts because you're giving them a framework, a vision that they can connect with that. So what does our vision actually look like? Well, there's really 3 components to it. The first one is an internal planning tool. An internal planning tool. And what we mean by this is that you probably, as a leadership team, will want to define kind of a global statement of what you're hoping to accomplish in the next 18 months, 2 years, 3 years with your men, and then maybe some bullet points about how we're going to do it. So, for example, it might be that you identify that one of the key things you need to do is reach men that are kind of more on the wide side by getting guys into relationships with one another. You have too many men living in isolation. And so you might say, look, in the next 18 months, this is kind of what we're going to work on. We're going to try to get men into authentic relationships with God and other men by providing some recreational activities, starting some small groups, connecting men to our couples groups, whatever those 3 or 4 or 5 things are. And that becomes your internal planning statement, okay? Now, you do not want to put this out on your materials, okay? You do not want to put this out on materials. What does a typical men's ministry purpose statement that you've seen on a brochure look like? Okay? I can tell you, they look like this. The men's ministry of First Church exists to help all the men in our church become spiritual leaders in their homes, their workplace, and the world for the glory of Jesus Christ and His church, right? Or whatever. So what happens about 4 words into that in your mind? Blah, 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 right? It's all that spiritual, godly man stuff. Whatever else they're going to say, I know he's going to tell me I should be a godly man, I should be doing evangelism, I should be worshiping, I should be a good husband, good father, whatever, okay? I already know. I don't need to listen to that. There's no emotional connection whatsoever. So hide your internal purpose statements, okay? You do not want that on brochures. You do not want that out there in front of people. What you want to put out in front of them is the second piece of this, which is an external challenge or call. And a great way to do this is to come up with a name that represents the men of your church. Something like Iron Men, or Men of Faith, or True Men, Real Men, Kingdom Men, First Men, okay? It's good that this name is something that a person can actually be. In other words, if you try to call the ministry to men in your church Refuel or something like this, it can be clever, but then you're going to have some difficulty as you begin to communicate about it. Because if you take the all-inclusive concept that we talked about in the first course, okay, every interaction our church has with any man is part of our ministry to men, then we're going to want to be able to talk about all the things that the men in our church are doing. And so we want to be able to say, we want to thank our men of faith who serve in our nursery every week. And as a matter of fact, we have a picture of them up here on the screen, and we just want to give them a round of applause and thank you for being one of our men of faith that works with our young kids. What a valuable contribution you're making. We want to thank the Iron Men that serve every week in the AV and the worship team and the choir and the praise band. What an incredible contribution these Iron Men are making to our worship experience on a weekly basis. Okay, so we're just beginning to describe anything that a man is doing in our church in the context of this name that we're giving to the men of our church. So the reason you don't use fire or refuel or something like that is it just becomes a little difficult to communicate. We want to thank the refuel men, the men of refuel. You see what I'm saying? It's hard to make that work, okay? So I encourage you to name it something that a person can be, because that just makes it easier to actually communicate. And then you can come up with a slogan that goes along with that if you want. So for example, we've had people that, Brothers in the Great Adventure, or we've had people that use Training Men for the Battle. Or a great example was a church that I worked with where they had Real Men. It was an acronym, and that was the name for, at that time, their men's ministry, because they didn't have the all-inclusive concept yet. That was the name for their men's ministry. And then they had this long sub-statement that they put on all their brochures, and buried in the middle of it was this phrase, whatever it takes. So when we got done, it went from this, R-E-A-L men, where all those letters meant something, with this long statement. And by the time we were finished, they had agreed to just go with Real Men, whatever it takes. Now, I don't know about you, but I want to be a part of a group of real men who do whatever it takes, And the idea is not to have every little theologically precise point in this or doctrinal point or whatever, because you're going to add all that content of what it actually means by creating this resonance over time with these stories, with these testimonies, with these experiences. That's how this begins to resonate with guys' hearts and minds. So use strong language. Another church I worked with had an example of where their thing was men's fellowship, and underneath it was join the journey. And so they asked me for some feedback on their ministry. We were talking about things. I said, well, tell me how this came about. And they said, well, the name of our men's group is Men's Fellowship. And then for this year, what we're doing is join the journey. And then, so they're, the relative size of it. And I said, okay, well, how'd you end up with Men's Fellowship? And they said, well, we debated a bunch of different names, and And, we finally realized, hey, the women use women's fellowship, and that works good for them, so why don't we just do that for the men? I thought, all right, that's probably not the best logic in the world, but anyway, let's go with it. And so then one guy said, yeah, it came down to men's fellowship or band of brothers, and we went with men's fellowship. Okay? Now, let me just, if you were to close your eyes and hear this, okay, hear these phrases. I'm going to say them exactly the same way. If I say to you, men's fellowship, join the journey. Or if I say band of brothers, join the journey. Now, if you're like most guys, when you hear men's fellowship, if you've been in church for a long time, boom, flat line, right? Means nothing. May mean some food, okay? But probably not food to get all excited about. Certainly not enough to get off the couch and not watch SportsCenter over, all right? Complete flat line. If you are not involved in the church and you hear men's fellowship, if you're over on the wide side of the continuum, I mean, you don't even really know what they're talking about. But whatever it is, you're probably not sure you want any of it, Okay? Now compare that to band of brothers. Well, a phrase like band of brothers has got lots of connotations. Some people might see the military side. Others might not be as aware of that. You hear the brotherhood idea. You hear the group idea. Everybody wants a friend. Everybody wants a brother. Everybody wants to be a part of something. And so you have this content that's being communicated that kind of connects with guys at a gut level. And that's what we want to try to accomplish when we come up with an external challenge or call. And then finally, we have our elevator speech. We have our elevator speech. And this is where we are able to quickly communicate why we're passionate about ministry with men. And the reason it's called an elevator speech is from the example, if we were to go downtown and you were on an elevator and all of a sudden right before it closed, a guy stuck his hand in and said, can I get on? And he gets on, he says, oh, Tom, hey, you've been wanting to talk to me about men's discipleship at our church. Tell me about that. And then he presses the button for 21. Okay? And so you've got, 30 seconds or however long it is, 45 seconds, to tell him about why you're passionate about men's discipleship. And so you need, as leaders, to come up with an elevator speech that can help you do that. And you ought to practice it. You all ought to learn it. In the book, No Man Left Behind, in pages 120 and 121, there's a clear process for developing your elevator speech. But the idea is to have a couple of sentences, usually involving an actual example, that it's a concrete story of somebody's life that was changed, that you can communicate to a man about why you want to see men be discipled in your church and your community. And again, think this is exampled throughout the scriptures as well. Look at the book of Nehemiah. If you read the book of Nehemiah, you see over and over again Nehemiah giving his elevator speech. The walls are broken down. The city's in disrepair. We need to repair the city of God. And he's constantly communicating that vision to people as a leader. And that's one thing that we need to example as well. So we're going to give you a chance to work on your vision in your church. And the way we're going to get you to do that is, first of all, we want you to describe, if you have a vision for your church or a mission statement or something like that, we want to make sure that your men's mission statement conforms to and maps to whatever the church's mission statement is. And so we want you to start with that information. And then you're going to add any kind of an internal planning purpose statement that you might have for your ministry to men. If you don't have one, maybe you can draft one based on what you've learned so far and think about what your greatest needs are in the life of your church right now. And then we want you to work on a men's ministry call or challenge or slogan. What is a name so that we can talk about the men of our church, all the men of our church, an all-inclusive perspective? Is there a slogan or a phrase we can use to kind of rally the troops around over the next 12, 18 months, 2 years, whatever the case may be? And then what are the components that might be involved in an elevator speech? Is there a story of a changed life, of a man who's been reached and now his fathers are going to have his children are going to have a Christian dad? What a great part of an elevator speech. I see Jim at church and I see his 4 kids and I think, wow, those 4 children have a dad who loves Christ. That's why I'm passionate. I see all the other kids in our community when my kids play sports, and I think, what a difference our church can make if we can reach their fathers. That's an elevator speech. So we want to give you a chance to actually work on that. In the planning section of your document, you have a sheet that gives you a step-by-step process for working on those components of your vision and how you're going to communicate it with the men of your church.
At the end of this session in your Methods and Tactics workbook, you'll find some questions for discussion and application. After you go through the discussion questions together, pull out the vision worksheet. Work through the steps on the worksheet to create a name, a slogan, an internal planning statement, and an elevator speech for your ministry. Don't try to get them perfect. You'll probably come back to these various times over the next few weeks.